Well, as many of you know, we are working through a sermonic series on empire, and we're going to continue with that series on today. In fact, I'm going to ask if you would turn to Acts chapter 2. I'm going to read verses 1 through 4 from the New Revised Standard Version of the text. Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. Acts 2, 1 through 4. Here is what it says. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place, and suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Amen. That's Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. And family, for the few moments that are mine, allow me to preach as you pray and the Lord empower from the theme, Power to the People. Power to the people. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, oh neighbor, the preacher's going to preach about power to the people. Power to the people. Sisters, brothers, and siblings, for the past few Sundays now, we have been taking a biblical field trip through the empires of sacred scripture. We have collectively confessed our neglect of examining the character of empire in the Bible compared to the amount of time and study that we've given to individuals of celebrated Sunday school stories. We've been encouraged over the past 2 weeks to widen the lens when we look at scripture so that we don't miss the ways that empire has shaped many of the stories that we've come to learn and appreciate. You'll remember, every Bible story has a context. Every story has a supporting cast. Every story has some main issues at stake. And when we don't examine what's going on around the main character, we are subject to miss the point of the passage altogether. So we recognize now, for example, that it's not enough to memorize the story of Moses unless we take into account the role that the Egyptian empire played in setting the stage for him to be called by God. For Exodus chapter 3 verse 7 records God as saying, I have heard the cries of my people and I know their suffering. When God couldn't stand the abuses of the empire anymore and the oppression of enslaved people any longer, the Bible says that God set something on fire. It's right there in the book. I ain't making it up. It's in the book. Exodus chapter 3 shows God setting a bush on fire. And only after the fire started did Moses start paying attention. Fire is funny like that, ain't it? But why in the world would God burn up something that seemingly had little to do with the matter at hand? Why would God burn a bush when the issue was beaten backs? Maybe God figured that oppressed people were more important than property. Maybe God figured that a bush could always be replaced, but a brother who can't breathe and a sister who's been shot takes precedence over property. But maybe God also knew that empire was so deep in Moses, shaping his thinking, his behaviors, his dreams, and his mentality, that it would take a fire that wouldn't stop burning for him to snap out of an empire state of mind. When God finally gets his attention, Moses is given a mission and a message to deliver to Pharaoh and the Egyptian empire. Through Moses, God tells Pharaoh, "Let my people go." But we didn't just look at the Egyptian empire through this series. We also looked at the Babylonian empire. We turned to the story of Daniel, and we had a good confession session that revealed that many people are too enticed by the entanglements of empire to confront it. When the empire embraces you, you can get all kinds of benefits, many of which are hard to turn down. I mean, who wouldn't want the corner office with the big window on the top floor? Don't you want luxury accommodations no matter where you travel in the world? 7 figures and full benefit sounds nice, don't it? Amassing wealth from labor you didn't do, obtaining paid speaking engagements about communities that you refuse to be accountable to, and acquiring credibility with white folk for translating for them the experiences of black folk. When the empire embraces you, you can get all kinds of benefits. And that's precisely what Daniel got. Daniel got benefits. He was a high-ranking official in the Babylonian Empire who got a bit too big for his britches, at least according to his co-workers. So they schemed and passed a law that they knew would place Daniel as a target in its scope. They were slick too, because the law they created didn't have Daniel's name listed in it specifically, but it was crafted in a way that would catch him anyhow. This biblical black code should bring to mind vagrancy laws, anti-enticement measures, and convict leasing. Daniel got busted, locked up, and thrown into a den of lions because he boldly broke the unjust law. Interestingly enough, though, the Bible says that the emperor of Babylon at the time, named Darius, actually liked Daniel and was upset that the law he signed caught his prized servant in its snare. However, though the emperor said he liked Daniel, he still didn't stick his neck out for Daniel. Though he said he liked Daniel, he still signed the 1994 crime bill that got Daniel locked up in the first place. Though he liked Daniel, he still vetoed funding for historically black colleges and universities. Though he liked Daniel, he still didn't pass legislation that would reform the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights or establish a civilian review board with teeth. Though he liked Daniel, he still allowed developers to gentrify the neighborhood and take Daniel's grandmother's house. Though he liked Daniel, he better not date his daughter, become his next door neighbor, or breathe too loud in the key of black within earshot of the emperor's vicinity. Daniel did everything he could to ingratiate himself to the empire that kidnapped him from his homeland. But at the end of the day, it still got him thrown to the lions. All this time, we thought the story of Daniel was just about felines. But come to find out, it's about a faulty and foul legislative system that feeds off of arresting, incarcerating, and executing people for the crime of responding to the crimes of empire, which builds a helpful bridge to our text today. For in today's text, we time travel about 2,000 years forward from the Babylonian Empire to the Roman Empire. Our text brings us to the scene where the followers of Jesus had just seen him be lynched by the state. Emperor Tiberius, the second emperor of the Roman Empire, had made Pontius Pilate governor of the region of Judea, and he was the one who ultimately signed the certificate of execution for the one who Dr. Freddie Haynes calls heaven's hero and earth's emancipator, Jesus the Christ. Now keep your lens nice and wide, because you need to know that part of the charges that were used to justify the arrest of Jesus, according to Luke chapter 23, verse 2, was that Jesus was organizing an uprising and forbidding people to pay taxes to the emperor. Many of us have been conditioned to only see Jesus' crucifixion through otherworldly terms. But I implore you today to consider what Aubrey Hendricks presents in his book, The Politics of Jesus. Namely, that the execution of the Messiah was also about the social and economic threat that Jesus posed to the empire's power in this world. The empire assassinated Jesus, and for nearly 2 months, his followers were left bewildered, and the movement he organized was made stagnant. Then something happened. Acts chapter 2 records what unfolded. 50 days after the emperor made its move, 50 days after the empire lynched your Lord and my Savior, God decided to make a move. After the Roman Empire killed Jesus, who represented the power of the divine enfleshed in a person, God decided to send power again. This time, though, not to a person. This time, God sent power to the people. It's right there in the Bible. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, tell the story of what the empire did to a person. But Acts tells the story of what God did for a people. The empire killed a person, but in killing a person, it unleashed God's power to the people. The empire killed a person, a human being in Ahmaud Arbery. The empire killed a person in Breonna Taylor. The empire killed a person in Breonna Taylor. The empire killed a person in the human being George Floyd. But even as we rightfully mourn and grieve what empire did to these persons, I can't help but see what's happening in the country right now. The empire killed a person, but God-like power is flowing to the people. God's power to the people is evident in the streets of Minnesota. God's power to the people has taken center stage in the streets of Oakland. God's power to the people is on the move in the streets of Nashville and North Carolina and Nevada and New York, Atlanta, DC, and Baltimore. All of these places are locations where God's power is flowing to the people. So many cities, so many states, you can't even keep track of all of the places where God is on the move. And isn't that just like the Lord? Once you think you got God cornered, the minute you think you have God contained, that's precisely when the power of God flows in such a way that it overtakes your senses, goes beyond what you expect, and blows your righteous mind. As these precious persons have been killed by the empire, it's almost like God is saying in response, we don't die, we multiply. The Bible says that after empire killed Jesus, in Acts chapter 2, God sent power to the people and filled them with what they needed to begin to change their circumstances. Changes started happening when power got to the people. when the people were together in one place, in the same room, on the same page, in the same situation, and filled with the same spirit. It wasn't everybody, but it was enough together in the same room. It wasn't the masses, but it was enough together in the same room. And I just gotta say, before I close this message today, enough with individual achievement, enough with scatterbrained activities, enough with pointless division, enough with draining debates, enough with short-lived passion, enough with microwave movements, enough with social justice caped crusaders that clamor to cameras but don't show up in community. God don't work like that. When God is banging on a system of imperial injustice, God don't send an individual. God don't send a person. God sends a group, because God knows that the empire can silence a solitary soul. But when people get together in the same room, on the same page, with the same level of commitment and ready to sacrifice in righteous ways, they become a formidable force. If you want to see how God can move through you and your group, study how God moved through those that came before you. Study how God moved through the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Study how God moved through the Combahee River Collective. See how God moved through the Deacons for Defense and Justice. See how God moved through the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. See how God moved through the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Study how God moved through the Cambridge Nonviolent Action Committee. See how God moved through the Universal Negro Improvement Association. If you want to see how God can move through you and your group, study how God moved through groups of people that came before you. And don't miss the chance to pay attention to how God is moving through people right under your nose. God is disseminating divine power to people who want to glorify the Almighty while supporting the most lowly. And if we get together, work together, struggle together, live together, cry together, plan together, endure together, fight together, and build together, not just in this moment, but for the marathon of this movement for freedom, then we'll be able to say that Pentecost power didn't just show up back in the Bible days, but it's showing up in you, it's showing up in me, and it's showing up in us right now. May God give power to the people to love one another. May God give power to the people to support one another. May God give power to the people to serve one another. May God give power to the people to speak up for those that cannot speak for themselves. May God give power to the people to discern the devils in their midst, pretending to be their friends. May God give power to the people, not just to march in a moment, but to sustain momentum for a marathon for freedom. May God give power to the people, not just to burn, but to build. Where are your people? Where is your front line in this moment of Pentecost, where God is giving power to the people?